So this piece here is where I think the body of work that Slow Room is a part of started. So this piece is titled The Slow Inevitable Death of American Muscle. And what it is two cars. These are muscle cars from the two Firebirds from the late 70s. And they're set up on a track system that pushes them together slowly, simulating a 20-mile-per-hour head-on collision. So just like the Slow Room on view here, it's a piece that is moving, but moving too slow to be seen. What you're seeing in the foreground here is the gear system that powers it. So it's a series of gears that reduce the speed down, and in the end there's a little hydraulic pump that actually pumps the fluid into the hydraulic cylinders that move the cars together. So they're constantly moving, and as you can see, the simulation is pretty decent. It was a lot of work to engineer this piece. I did it with a friend of mine, Carl Biewald, who's an engineer. This is the piece at the end. We took a lot of different information from different sources in order to figure out the engineering and figure out how much force and what it would actually take to make this happen. We took data from actual collisions, how much weight, how much force, those kind of things. And then we also looked at machines that crushed cars, how they were actually made, and the size of the materials and the hydraulics and the forces used, and came up with a solution that simulates it pretty well. We do a lot of modifications to the actual car to make it happen, because the physics are a little different from what actually happens in a car collision. In a car collision, you have energy in all the components of the car and coming to halt by the two cars impacting. Here you have energy in the rear cylinders being transferred through the car, so it's a little different. But through a little bit of welding and modification to the cars, we get a collision that's pretty realistic. Each one is a little different. We've done it about 10 times. In different places. This one here is the favorite and also the least favorite. I get hate mail from people that love muscle cars weekly, and
Is this the same set of cars every time?
this is the same piece that I'm showing you here. There's other cars I'll show you in a second, different cars. So, but yeah, we get hate mail. They feel that I'm attacking the cars specifically, and it's oops, we're getting a little weird thing there. What I try to explain is that I'm actually a huge fan of the cars. I mean, but they're historical. You know, it was. I guess the best way to express it is I feel like those cars express the time and an energy that really well. But you know, everything changes, and we move on beyond that, and things have to die in order for things to live, and so that's really the heart of this piece. Is the idea that in order to create something, you have to destroy something. So, you know, if you want to make a table, you have to cut a piece of wood or whatever it is you're making the table out of. And so the act of creation, you need the act of destruction. And
What's the time limit?
they vary. So the fastest we've done it is 4 days, and the slowest we've done it is over 2 years. So they can be very slow. The inspiration for this piece is comes from a lot of different areas. I've been really fascinated with geology and how, you know, how glaciers move and how tectonic plates move, and how, if you imagine, you know, the changing of our planet, you know, and how that's invisible, but apparent at the same time. So those kind of ideas were, were inspiration for the piece, as well as things like just modern cinema, where we constantly see these collisions in almost every film, and it's this pivotal point where you're taking this highly organized object and you're destroying it. And these objects are, not just any objects. These cars are reflections of the people that drive them. They're made to reproduce egos and large egos. The person that drives a Prius is a different person that drives a Camaro. And so we really feel ourselves as part of these cars. We choose cars that tell people what we want people to think of us as, etc. And so that, and we see this all the time in film, these crashes that are really compelling, because they are the end of this highly organized thing that we relate to as extensions of our body. But in a film, you see it from one specific point of view, and and it's part of a narrative. And I thought it would be interesting to take it away from that film and make it three-dimensional again, and make it something that you could touch and feel. One of the interesting things in this piece is you can, you do two things. You take away all the drama from the incident. So it's this incident where you're usually happens in a fraction of a second, and it's terrifying and and dangerous. And in this piece, all that is gone, and it's slow and contemplative. So experiencing it is like kind of similar to watching like a log being consumed in a fire, where you can it's this inherently interesting transformation that is part of what life is, and compelling to watch. And terrifying conceptually, but not but also warming in another way. Here's a little bit of detail on how it's made. So this is the track. This is what actually powers the piece underneath. So the cylinder is a hydraulic cylinder, and it connects to the car via a bunch of welding. So this is us actually welding it up. The piece was a real stretch to make. It was originally I made a model, scale model, and then showed that to some people in Brussels at Stook. This is us bringing it into the museum there. We had this giant crane. It was super fun. And they liked the idea and funded the project, but like most projects like this, everything comes a little late. And so these are just some of the early conceptual drawings of how it came together. And so we didn't have any time to test it in the US before we shipped it over. We had to do welding on site in Brussels. We shipped 2 cars that collectively were worth maybe $1,800, and they spent $13,000 to air freight them because they were so late. They got the freight compensated, and I think that was the last year that the shipping company supported the free shipping for the venue. Oh, that was about 2007, 2008, maybe. And yeah, so I've shown it a bunch of times, and it's fun. It's always a little different cars, different places. Like I was saying before, each car has an identity, and we strive for different things. We've used a lot of the muscle cars. The original way that the muscle cars came into being was sort of an accident. When I made the original model, I was imagining a everyday car crash, maybe a Honda Civic and a Camry or something like that. So I wanted it to be approachable and be more about the accident than the car. But when I went to make a model of the car, you find models of Ferraris and Porsches and things like that, and I thought they were a little. So then the muscle cars, I thought, well, most people have ridden in a muscle car like that, they're kind of Americana. And then when we stepped back after the model was made, then the title appeared, because it was this powerful other narrative that was incorporated into it. And Europe loves to, laugh at America, so they loved the title, and it worked really well for that. And it's been that ever since. Well, it's that most of the time. We actually change the title when it's not the muscle cars, but I have a bad history of changing titles, just in different situations. I have like 3 or 4 titles in my own hard drive for every piece. As I make it, I give it a new name. This is a different piece, kind of similar. So these are 2 figures. These are just bought figures. So I do a lot of pieces where some of the parts are bought and then modified or changed in some way. So these are just 2 kind of classical reproductions. And then I set them up on this mechanism so that they would constantly wear into each other. So like most relationships are, an exchange of some kind, and we change each other. And so these 2 figures, are constantly rubbing against each other, and it takes forever because there's not a lot of pressure, just a small amount. But they slowly change each other over time. So again, there's this idea of transformation, and this might be a good point. There's an idea, I think one of the basic ideas of making art is that you have some sort of idea, some sort of feeling, and then you take that and you put it into an object, into a painting, into a sculpture, in such a way that maybe somebody else can come to it and take that back out. And it's a great idea, kind of a foundation idea in art making, but it's also kind of impossible and not true, because the object always changes. There's no object that's really static. As much as we try to conserve paintings, any conservator will tell you they're always changing. We try our best, but they're in flux, and we also change around them. So, what, the Mona Lisa meant to somebody 100 years ago is different from 50 years ago and different from 200 years ago, because the society has built such a package around it that you can't see that object anymore the same way that somebody could 100 or 200 years ago or whatever. And I think that's ultimately, I like the goal of trying to make the object that stays, but I also like to reflect that change is what we are, and without change we can't have creativity, and we can't, even be alive. We live and we die, are born by design. It's not an accident that we, age and die. If that didn't happen, this whole system that is our planet wouldn't function. There wouldn't be enough room. There wouldn't be, we have to eat. We have to, all these things. So these pieces are about that idea and trying to bring that into the gallery as a process and as an object at the same time. This is essentially the same piece at a different scale. So these ones are about 5 feet tall, also store-bought. Just bought at Fountains of Wayne in New Jersey. And then they're hung up. And this one's nice. It wears away a little faster, still pretty slow, but you get a nice, you can just kind of see it there, a nice little mark on the ground as they're wearing away. And it's always funny because somebody inevitably comes and sweeps it up, and it's fine. It makes more the next day, but usually somebody gets upset. I get a phone call. They swept it up. Is it okay? And it's fine. So if those were a couple, this is the orgy version. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of figures in there, and these ones are. I guess as an orgy probably is a little more violent and a little more hectic, so they break their limbs apart a little quicker. And you got all kinds of different figures, and you even have some horses in there, and an elephant, I think. Right, this is the next piece. So this piece actually is a little older than those. This isn't exactly chronological, but this one is it's mechanical, robotic, computer controlled. And what it is a teacup at the bottom, and I was interested in that actual break, the actual moment when the teacup shatters apart. You know, it's this beautiful object, and there it is in its apart section. So what it does is it reproduces that moment and then puts it back together. And it's kind of, you know, it doesn't put it back together completely. It tries. And you can see, you know, there's still obviously seams and that kind of thing. And I have a love-hate relationship with technology in general. We look to it as almost a modern religion to solve so many problems. You know, physics has replaced religion for most people in terms of big cosmology, you know, stars and what they're doing and planets and all that kind of stuff. And we pay homage to technology every time we buy a new Apple product or whatever, you know, in a different way, but it's still a system that, and it offers, it's not a clear criticism, but it's a critique in my heart about what it has to offer. There's still limitations, and we're still sometimes sold something that doesn't always give what you know, like things like, you know, the computers were supposed to make our days shorter, right? And I'm not sure they have done that. They just change things a lot. So here's a close-up view of it apart, and then should be a short video here. So that's the original break. The grid is to document it as carefully as I could so that I can, this one, you know, I wanted to get as close as I could to the actual break. With the limitations of the technology and the budget that I had. So this one will forever take you know, duplicate this one simple act. Not quite HD, but it was made a while ago, so a little fuzzy up there, but they're there.
Is that kind of real time?
Yeah, that's real time. So yeah, this one doesn't, I mean, it's slower than the actual break, but not super slow.
So is this robotics? I mean, what?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us what, I'm sure you already didn't tell us, but what kind of classes did you take to learn this kind of stuff?
The class I took was making lots of mistakes at home. It's all, well, I've been doing it for a long time, and I've learned a lot in the field. I used to do animatronic stuff for Henson and stuff like that after I graduated from grad school. That was like 10 or 15 years ago now. But yeah, just trial and error, slowly. Again, it's the kind of love-hate. I mean, I get really fascinated with the problems, and the engineering aspect has always been a big part of the work. And I've always loved movement, so, you know, I really love intricate movements. You know, I used to, even before this work, I used to do performance work with myself in the pieces, but I really hated performing. But I love the movement, so like having mechanical movement allowed me to have things moving without, you know, having to be in the piece. So this piece is called Measuring Angst, or Bar Fight. And it's very similar to the last piece, but it simulates taking a beer bottle and throwing it across the room and having it explode into the wall and then go back together. So it's a super large piece when it's fully installed. It's like 30 feet long and about, you know, 14 feet high, but suspended on cables, so most of the mechanism is up above, kind of a track system. And what you're seeing here is what you see floating across the room. And there's some views of it breaking apart. So, super complicated. This is a video of it. Yeah, I cringe even now looking at it. It's just like so much work and so much things to maintain, and every time I put it up, it's at least, you know, a week's work to just get it all back together and functioning again. But I really liked the moment. It was fun. We showed it in Austria, and Angst doesn't mean the same thing it means fear, essentially. And then it was brought over by, I forget which philosopher, but it was brought over and in the way that we know it now, in a sort of existential, like he used it to explain existential fear, and he used angst, and it brought over. And I didn't even realize that until everybody in Europe was like, measuring fear, what does that mean? And so it was kind of an interesting connection with the language that was a kind of cool surprise. So it doesn't actually touch the wall. Neither one of them actually touch the surface, but this video is a little sped up from the actual piece. Obviously, in film, you don't have the same kind of patience that you do in a gallery space. And there's a lot of things. I've always been interested in the interaction between film and real life. Obviously, all these pieces have a relationship to film and derive a lot of their ideas from things that I've seen in film. But there's so many things that you can explore in a real space that are impossible to explore in film. And this piece it's really nice because you're in the room and you can have this object floating by you, and you can come within centimeters of it, and and then step back, and it's continuing to move around you. So I find that a lot of fun. This piece is called Detritus, and detritus is essentially garbage or poo. It could be anything, but often poo. So what it is 12 tons of salt and a type of rapid prototype machine that I developed that prints with salt. And what I liked about that was I wanted to achieve a kind of a moment where things are falling apart and being put together at the same time. Kind of like a compression of time and space, kind of like in the other pieces where you're just slowing things down. I wanted to create an imaginary vista where you could see society building itself up and falling down at the same time. So this is obviously a very abstracted version of that. And so it makes these box-like forms endlessly in the space. And they're super fragile. And so they sort of deteriorate, and people are allowed to interact with them. So, if a kid wants to come by and squish them, that's part of it. So the pieces are constantly moving up and moving down at the same time. And here's, this is sped up so that you can kind of get an idea of what goes on. It builds slowly, and it's hanging from 4 cables. So it can float, it floats in the room, and it's about the size of a small trash can. And it can move anywhere within the space. So it sort of floats, moves around you as it's building. And so you can walk around the room with it at the same time. And so it would just build and break and build and constantly. We had it up for about a month in this installation in Brooklyn. And yeah.
About how long, what's your average time that you spend on creating a project from concept to?
Often about a year. They're usually not built completely all at once. They start and stop a little bit often. So there's usually an early conceptual phase, and they draw most of the idea out. And so I get a pretty good handle on what I'm building, and then there could be up to 5 years between that phase and actually building it. Usually I'm building for a specific show. So, I'll have the drawings ready and talk to a space about a project, and then put the project together. And that phase is somewhere usually in between 6 months to a year, depending on what the piece is.
So are these project-based for installation in museums have any private collectors?
Both. They're mostly set up originally for galleries or museum spaces or something like that. And then that's always been my primary interest. I haven't really geared any of the work directly for collecting, and it's mostly hard to collect. But we have sold 2 of the car crashes and the slow room. So some of these works do find homes. One of the rubbing figures, which was called To Dust, sold as well. So we do find homes for them, but I'm definitely totally focused on the showing of the work, not the collecting of the work. So, and I'll definitely accept a check, but I'm totally geared on showing it. So another aspect of the piece that was actually pretty controversial, but I still like, is we set up a hot tub to view it in. And I mean, my thought was, well, I grew up in California, and there was definitely hot tub culture, and we grew up on a mountaintop, and there was a hot tub, and you could sort of survey the land and watch things, and I kind of wanted that same feeling. And I also just wanted to hang out in this room with a hot tub, and it was great. We had it there for a month, and we'd come at night and be able to open the gallery up and drink a few beers and watch the piece. So it was a lot of fun. So this piece is called Explosion. And what it is there's 7 identical pieces in the room, and each box is a series of boxes within each other. So the outside box is a plexiglass cube about 3/4 of an inch thick, and then inside there's a series of 1/4 inch cubes, and then inside the innermost cube is a charge, an explosive. We use black powder, and so they were set up to randomly go off during the course of the exhibition. So again, this is another piece that I think comes from television and media. We see these explosions all the time, but we don't experience them ourselves that often. And there's these amazing, beautiful, terrifying transformations. Here's the cube after it's been destroyed. And the goal was to bring it and harness it and make it as safe as possible, but also make it as, true to its nature as an explosion as possible. So it was a lot of fun figuring out how to make that happen. We had pyrotechnicians and all kinds of insurance people, and it was done in Texas at a university at TCU, and they were great. They were really excited to do it, and they also had, they had a pyrotechnician on staff for doing the football games, and they had an insurance person on staff for insuring the school. So they had all the guys there, and they were all excited to do it because it was a little out of the norm, and and we had the police and fire, but it all turned out really great. So we also were able to get these crazy high-speed film. There's one more coming up, I believe.
Is there a sound?
No. Well, there's sound certainly from the explosion, but not on the film. I mean, we did record it, but it doesn't correlate to the image very well.
Did the time to go off when there was people there, or you didn't know when they were going to go off?
The people, the intention was that the people weren't to know, and they could come in. We had to skirt that a little bit with health and safety to, so that there was indications. Towards the end, we got a little more lax as they were a little more sure that things weren't dangerous. But in the end, we didn't have it ever completely just timed, because we wanted to make sure there wasn't, a small child or something next door. But I want to do it again, and I think hopefully a lot of these pieces, are essentially experiments as much as they are artwork, and doing them again allows you to, change bits and pieces of it. Hopefully, since we have the history of doing it here, we can go to the next institution if I decide to do it again, and try it again with a little better.
Did you alter the amount of powder charge so that you would have different amounts of damage?
We did. The first one was a little too much. So it didn't break anything, but it came a little too close. It was a series of small cracks on most of the bolts. And the bolts were fine, but the plexi was cracking. So we reduced the charge a little bit. But the pyrotechnician was definitely excited to, make it as exciting as he could. So it was fun. He is, yeah. All right, so now, I hope my time is all right. I think we're somewhere around half an hour. This is the piece, this is the start of the piece that's here. So this is the slow room. So this was the first experiment in the shop. This is the actual, what you're looking at is the ring that you usually just see in the wall, and then the plate is the is part of the mechanism that pulls the strings in. So this was the very first test in the studio. And like the car crash piece, this was first shown in Europe, and never enough time or money to, I wasn't able to set up a whole working version of the piece in my studio before we had to ship it. So what we worked with this chair and some strings, and to make sure that the winch and everything worked out okay. And then we shipped it all to Europe. And this was the first one in Europe, and we put it together in 4 or 5 days with, it was kind of terrifying because to, fly all the way to Europe, and all I had was the winch and nothing else. And I didn't know what was in Berlin, and I didn't know what the thrift situation in Berlin, or we'd go to IKEA, or, we really didn't know. But we had great assistance with the gallery, and Berlin has, if you ever go, has excellent thrift places. They're just amazing. And so we were able to find all this great stuff and put it together. And I don't have an image of the one here, but one thing that's interesting is how similar and different they are. They all have a little bit of character from the place they're at, but they also have a lot in common with each other. A lot of that has to do with the budget and I guess the general state of what's available within that budget. I wanted it to be a room that somebody could really feel comfortable with and imagine themselves being in. Maybe I'll just take a second to explain it for anybody who hasn't seen it. So what we're looking at here is the hole in the back wall. On the other side of the hole is a winch, and each one of these strings is connected to different parts of all the furniture in the room. And then when it's turned on, the winch will slowly pull all those strings and all the stuff into the hole or towards the hole. And I think, it's trying to pull everything through the hole, but I was imagining, if St. Peter does exist, maybe a lot of us won't actually go through that hole either. and it's like that with this piece. Most of the stuff kind of crumbles at the entrance. We picked up all the stuff in the local thrift stores and set it up and started it in action, and then I left, and I got to see the rest of the piece via photography and stills. But it was very successful. Then we did it again here in Miami, or here in the States in Miami. And so this is set up at a fair, and it was set up for 4 days. The last one was set up for, I believe, a month and a half. And the funny thing is, I should have brought it, but it's being run for an ad for a German newspaper, and the tagline says, "In Berlin, where you can't tell if it's art or trash." And it's pretty good. I still get people like, "Did you author it?" I didn't. They just took the photo and made it. I mean, but it's fine. But it was.
People, you have a team of people who...
I usually work with, I'm always saying we, of course. I do sometimes have assistants for different pieces, and all of these pieces end up being very collaborative in nature. When you're working with an institution, you're always working with, a curator or a gallery director or technicians and all that kind of thing. So they're very collaborative in their in making them happen. Rachel picked out a lot of the furniture here in this one, sent me photos back and forth, and we talked out what was available. And so these pieces are definitely collaborative in nature in the end. And I'm lucky to get a lot of support from curators and different institutions. And okay, so this one, I didn't realize this was some sort of GIF. But and this is in Kestrel Bridges. So yeah, now it looks like a boat swaying or something, right? But anyways. And then these are some details as it's being destroyed. And if you look closely, I'm not sure exactly what's made it to this installation, but we reuse a fair amount of the small, like the horse has been in more than one. Think about that in Germany. And this is what the first one turned out to be in documentation. So we were talking about this earlier. The documentation is a beautiful film, and I've actually sold this as a separate piece, but it's also very different from the actual object. In the beginning, we weren't sure whether we wanted to, or whether I wanted to show the documentation with the piece, letting the viewer know. And this was true for the car crash too. Letting the viewer see what was going to happen, or whether it was better to have them separate. And at this point, I've come to the conclusion I like them separate, but both available. Because I think it's important in the car crash in this piece to imagine the people that belonged in this room, and to imagine what happened, where the piece was the day before and where it's going. I think that that's a lot of the fun in viewing it, and and creates a lot of the connection for the viewer within the piece. Like I was saying before, I started out doing performance work with myself in pieces, and then transferred to these kind of pieces. But to me, the figure is always still there. Like, this was always, in my mind, a kind of maybe grandmotherly kind of room. Not specific exactly to anybody I knew, but that kind of feel to it. Yeah, but the documentation obviously has all this extra information that's different and unique and quite compelling in a different way. So it's.
Video art. I can't believe that glass piece is not breaking.
Yeah, it's surprising what survives sometimes.
Does the winch ever get clogged up?
Definitely, but it's super, super strong. So when you pull it apart, there's all kinds of things wrapped around each other inside the winch, but it just keeps going. There's like over 20,000 pounds of pull available, so quite a bit. And I kind of like the end where there's just, like, it's still moving. Once in a while you'll see something, a string pulled tight and change it, but mostly it's over.
So that's the end.
This is the end, but if you look carefully, you can still see like one string starting to get tight in the middle there. And so things are still changing a little bit, but mostly it's over. And now I think He's over.